I'd like you to imagine, if you will, you're preparing to share maybe your testimony with somebody. Or maybe you want to tell them about something that God has done in your life or the reason why you're a believer. And so you start to run through a conversation in your head. And you have a setting in your mind. There should be hopefully a nice, quiet, peaceful setting. And you're going through what you want to say. You get to the end of it, and then you decide to ask the magic question, so what do you think? And the person replies, so? So what? So what do I care about this? So what do you care about me? So who gives you the authority to say that you're going to be in heaven and I'm not? Who is to you to say that there's even a God who exists? Who's to say that I'd want to be in heaven? Because when I see churches are so full of hypocrites, why do I want to spend eternity with them in the first place? And so the scene just kind of devolves into something like this. So you just wonder, and then after a while, you kind of back down and say, well, maybe not a good idea. Let's just kind of keep it a little quieter, and this is not a good subject to broach. The Apostle Paul wrote the book of Romans for a very important reason. He's trying to ground the church in the scriptures. By the time Paul wrote the book of Romans, he had been a Christian for about 21 years. Now, many of you have been believers longer than 21 years. But I think unlike Paul, we come to church, and that's for us, is growing. Maybe we come to a Bible study or something like that. Paul led the church. Paul led the studies. Paul went there week after week trying to prove that Jesus was the Messiah. Paul dealt with the full range of beliefs. Atheists, polytheists, monotheists, agnostics, people who accepted him and people who hated him. With that in mind, he wrote the book of Romans. And in Romans chapter 2, last week, we found out that Paul said a few things to some of his readers, the Jewish readers in particular. He used phrases like, therefore you have no excuse, or because of your hard and impenitent heart, you are storing up wrath, or, but if you call yourself a Jew, and then finally, he said, you who boast in the law dishonor God by breaking the law. There are other examples of things just from chapter 2. Paul was not just stepping on toes, he was full on stomping it on their feet. With that in mind, let's take a look at what happens next as we look at Romans chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. I'll put the verses up, and I'm going to ask that I'll read the ones in white, and then together we'll read the verses that are in yellow. Starting with verse 1. Then what advantage has the Jews? Or what is the value of circumcision? What? And what if some were unfaithful? Does their faithlessness nullify the faithfulness of God? But if our unrighteousness serves to show the righteousness of God, what should we say? That God is unrighteous to inflict wrath upon us? And I speak in a human way. But if through my lie God's truth abounds to his glory, why am I still being condemned as a sinner? When we read it, it sounds like it's just a little bit of a dialogue, but imagine, if you will, this is an argument. This is a debate. You've seen heated debates over politics. It's not just a you speak and I speak, but it's a quick, but what about this? But what about that? But what about this? And this is what Paul is faced with. Paul used a very interesting method of communication throughout the book of Romans, a method that he has not used in the rest of his books. He used questions, not questions like what we think of, like, how's your mom? How you been feeling? Have you been eating? All those kind of things that we normally do for social things. How was last week for you? Paul uses sharp rhetorical questions where he's playing the devil's advocate with himself. You all know what a devil's advocate is, right? Person who deliberately takes the opposing view. Now, maybe he's doing that because he wants to identify with his Jewish readers. Paul himself was a Jew. He converted to Christianity. All of the things that he fought for as a Jew, he was now fighting against as a Christian. There's a lot of things that were totally opposite. And I think Paul is trying to show by raising some of the very objections that others raise, he's trying to show that he understands where these people are coming from because he had been there himself. You'll notice that in these 8 verses, there's at least 4 sets of questions that were raised. So again, this is just a really quick bang, 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 back and forth, back and forth. And so we'll look at these questions and try to get an understanding of where these questions are coming from, get a little taste of what Paul says about it, and how we can prepare ourselves for it in the future. First question is, so what makes the Jews so special? What makes the Jews so special? Paul said, then what advantage has the Jews, or what is the value of circumcision? So much in every way. And he said, to begin with, the Jews were entrusted with the oracles of God. He's saying that the Jews were God's chosen people. God started with the Jews. They had a spiritual heritage which they forsook. They drifted away from their heritage of being God's people, just to being people who may have done things the way God wanted, but they focus on the doing and not the relationship with Him. People who had more of a robotic relationship. Relationships, a lot of times, you can tell when they start to go cold and start to get a little stale. People will do things just out of reflex, but not out of care. People will do things just out of habit, out of expectation, but not out of desire. And so Paul was trying to warn them against that. Now, we look at the Jews, and we see here, he's talking about these Jews who forgot God's way. And you see all that described very clearly in Romans chapter 2. And we think, well, that's the Jews. But that's also true today. True today, even here in our church family, even in Abide Fellowship, even in the broader CCIC, even in the broader Church of Christ. Our church has children's ministries. We have youth ministries. We have adult ministries. And there's all sorts of gradations within that. The idea is that, of course, when we bring our children in, we want to show them what it means to be a Christian. They don't know Jesus yet, but we want to show them what it means. And our hope is to see them grow up. And as they get older, they ask questions and things, and then they come to Christ, and then they become just like us as older folks. But we also have to recognize that there is a reality that in many households, the chain breaks somewhere. Whether it's a child, whether it's an adult, whether it's a parent, a young adult, a teenager, a college ager, some people do drift. And we wonder what happened. Well, you say, well, gee, this person went to Sunday school. They went to Awanas. They went to CIA. This person got baptized. This person served on the worship team. This person taught classes. What happened? And it can happen for a lot of reasons people drift. And I don't want to get into all the reasons that people drift away from the Lord, but it happens. And the rest of the family has to wrestle with, okay, what are we going to do? How can we help this person come back? And hope that all of us as a church family are sensitive to that. And remember to keep reaching out to those who have strayed. The Jews were special, but they forsook their spiritual heritage. Their heritage was designed to give them advantage just as we want to give our children advantages. We want to let them know that there is a God. But advantages only work to your advantage when you take advantage of them. Right? It only helps when you really grasp it for yourself. When our daughter was just come out of college, I remember she and I were talking about something, and she said, I don't want to just worship your God. This has to be my God too. And I said, well, yeah, you're right. I don't want you to worship him just because I do. You worship him because you want to. And I praise God that she made that choice to continue with the Lord. But every person has to come to that point. Not just as a time of change, but even as a habit of going forward. An interesting thing here, Paul ends off in verse 2, says, to begin with, then he says the Jews were entrusted with the oracles of God. When you see to begin with, what should follow? Well, there's a first to begin with, and then there should be a second thing. Paul never got to the second thing. The next verse, the Jewish reply, or the devil's advocate replies, so what about the Jews' unfaithfulness? So what if someone unfaithful? Will their faithlessness nullify the faithfulness of God? What kind of examples are we setting for non-believers? Are we showing them what a Christian looks like, how a Christian lives? Are we showing them a person who has different priorities than what the rest of the world has? Are we showing them that we're willing to be different, even take flack for it? Or are we poor examples of the God that we claim to follow? There used to be an old saying, that's perhaps redundant, but there's an old saying that says, like father, like son. A lot of times you see that when parents are in a professional career, particularly law or medicine. And the idea is that the kids growing up feel that pressure, that expectation that I need to be like dad. I need to be like mom. I need to go to law school. I need to go to dental school. I need to go to medical school. It just kind of comes along with the territory. And so like father, like son. But sometimes when you read stories, let me give you a different example. You hear stories about gangs of kids going into shopping malls, let's say down into Valley Fair, and wreaking chaos over in the stores. And maybe you see videos of it, and these kids are running around, stealing things and trashing displays and stuff. Sometimes you ask, where are their parents? Where are their parents? Some others may ask, what kind of parents do they have? Right? Kids who act like that, what kind of examples do they have at home? And people will judge God or view God a lot of times on the way they view us. What kind of models are we setting? What kind of models are we setting? like son, instead of like father, like son, is like son, like father. You are a reflection. I am a reflection. We are all reflections of our Heavenly Father. And we need to watch what kind of reflections we set. Paul answers that question. He says, "Let God be true, though everyone were a liar, as is written, that you may be justified in your words and prevail when you are judged." I like that phrase, "Let God be true, though everyone were a liar." Only God is true, everyone else is a liar. This is the heart of the gospel. God is perfect. Mankind is not. Only God is perfect. Man will fail, but God will not. It's very important to keep that in mind. This is the heart of the gospel right here. Because God can set the standards. We cannot. We can vote for certain standards. We can change certain standards. But it's God who sets the overall standards for us. God is perfect, and we are not. I think, to me, this is one good evidence for the existence of God, the idea of perfection. The idea that things can always be better. Even though we can't achieve it, we always strive to make things better. If you look at bird nests, they're made very simply. Most of them are just a bowl, right, with twigs and feathers and leaves and things like that. Generally made of roughly the same material, sticks. But then you look at people. What does your house look like? Does your house look like a bowl? Well, my bowl has three bowls. Mine has a bowl sitting on the side. My bowl is subdivided. My bowl has 3 places you can go use the restroom at. Everybody starts to modify their bowls. But in the animal kingdom, they don't worry about that. Since time immemorial, those nests have been the same. The birds are happy. We're never happy. We always want something a little bit better. I don't like my bowl. I'm going to change the color of it. I'm going to change the carpeting in my bowl. We have that idea that things can be better. And I think that is a good evidence that God has placed his imprint upon us, that things should be better. The rest of the animal kingdom, they've arrived, but we never arrive. Third set of questions comes up. What's wrong with me? It says here, if our unrighteousness serves to show the righteousness of God, what should we say? That God is unrighteous to inflict wrath upon us? And I speak in a human way, by no means, for then how should God judge the world? This is an attempt to disqualify God. See, we can disqualify people from taking a position of judgment if we can show bias, if we can show that things are not done fairly, if we can show that things are not done properly. That's why we have appeals courts. They say, oh, they ignored this part of the law. They misapplied this standard. And therefore, a case gets thrown out of court. Therefore, a case needs to be retried because it wasn't done right. And so the thinking behind this reasoning is that if I can show that God is unrighteous, then he cannot be the judge. He cannot be Lord. He cannot be the one who's in control because he's no better than the rest of us. A lot of times we have images. You can see people when they have gods. You look, maybe if you go to, people's homes who are not Christians, and you can see certain statues and things like that. And a lot of times these statues and these pictures are something that's just like a regular human being, but just more so. For example, God of wisdom. God of wisdom generally has what? A big head, right? The God of war, not some skinny 98-pound weakling. This guy's chiseled out and chiseled out and buffed up that, I don't mess with him. They take a human being and they amplify whatever aspect that they want of that person, and that becomes their God. So that's when you make a God in your own image. Make him just like yourself, but then you add a few more things. I look at some of these ads for horror films, and all these horror creatures have eyes. Do they have to have eyes? Well, no, but everything that we see around us has eyes, so therefore it's going to have eyes too. We take things and just kind of magnify them, and that's what we try to do here. And okay, God is just a bigger form of me, and therefore if I have failures, he's got failures too. And if I'm not qualified, if I'm not perfect, neither is he. So why should I answer to him? God is no better than me. He's no better than me. Fourthly, says, so why is it my fault? But if through my lie, God's truth abounds to his glory, why am I still being condemned as a sinner? And why not do evil that good may come? As some people slanderously charge us with saying, no condemnation is just. Notice that middle sentence in there says, and why not do evil so that good may come? If I'm an evil person, isn't that glorifying God? Because that makes the contrast so much greater. Therefore, being evil is good because it glorifies God. And what we're doing now is we're redefining what is evil. We're reframing evil. We're reframing the importance of evil. We're reframing the existence of evil. We're saying that God needs evil. It says that God is wrong to judge us, therefore, since he too is capable of sin. We'll try to justify evil in any way that we can. You see that when you read the papers, when someone's arrested for a crime, and then you read what the lawyers have to say about it and what the other people have to say. You always hear the opposite view, an opposing view, kind of justifying, hey, this is actually a good thing. All in reality was doing is just justifying sin. I want to make sure we don't take advantage of God's mercy. So in the 8 verses here, Paul wrestles with at least four huge questions. He doesn't answer them really well, kind of kicks them down the road a little bit. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to kick the can down the road a little too. Because Paul will get back to it. Oh, let me get back to this one here. This verse here talks about why not do evil that good may come. We redefine evil and calling it good. In these questions that we've wrestled with and are just even approached right now, there's two major themes. One is the problems with the Jews, as Romans 3, verses 1 to 4. And Paul talks a lot about the Jews later on in the book of Romans. Romans 2, which was the previous week. Romans 4, Romans 9 through 11. Then the other two questions he had with sets of things were about problems with me, talking about sin, my sin. Paul brings that up in Romans 3, 5 through 8, and 12 through 16. So as we go through the book of Romans together, we will go in and out, back and forth between these. And Paul will go through these things in more depth. And so I'm not going to steal anyone's thunder, but I just want to let you know this is the way Paul has structured the book. And as we go through it, we will come back to a lot of these very same issues and see what Paul has to say. And the main thing here now is the title of my sermon. So many people have reminded me of it. So many of you have come up to me and said, so. I take pride in knowing that you guys recall at least what my sermon title was. But as you prepare to encounter these so questions, so what about this? So what about that? Here's some guidelines for you. Number one, don't think that you have to win every argument. It's not it involves, following Jesus involves the intellect, definitely. But more than that, it involves submission. It involves admitting what you have done was wrong in the first place. It involves being willing to follow God. It's not just a matter of, do the numbers line up? As I said, for many people, maybe they don't even think that they're sinners. And maybe they never thought that the way they've been believing all this time was wrong. And they don't want to say that. It's too hard to do that. There are struggles more than just on the intellectual side. There are struggles on the emotional side of confession, admission. There are struggles on the discipleship side, that of following, that of growing. There are struggles on the transformation side. If I agree that there is a God, and if I agree that He has rules, then guess what? That means I have to follow those rules. And maybe I don't want to. There's going to be struggles all along the way. So be aware that it's more than just an intellectual exercise. It's more than just trying to lay things out. Laying things out is important, but it's not as simple as just that. Paul himself wrote, I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might win some. He didn't say that I might win all, but he's saying I will try to win some. That's as best as I can do it. So don't feel that you have to win everything. Second thing, you are responsible to share what you can. You're responsible to share what you can. In Ezekiel 33, God calls Ezekiel to be what is called a watchman. Now, you don't know what a watchman is. No, we're not talking about a Walkman. We're not talking about a watch that you wear on your wrist. You're talking about a lookout. And as that lookout, he's supposed to scan the distance and see if there's any enemy coming. The job of the watchman or the lookout is to say, someone's coming. Kind of like a motion sensor, on your home alarm system, right? A light comes on, the thing goes beep, someone's coming, friend or foe, who is it? And you'll look on your phone, do I answer or not? Your phone rings, you look at caller ID, that's your watchman. Say, do I recognize this number or not? The watchman in the Old Testament sense was a lookout to say someone's coming. And his job was to tell the people behind him, the people inside the city, saying someone's coming. Now the people have a responsibility. They could either listen to the watchman and they say, enemy's coming, let's pull our forces together and get ready for an attack. Or they could say, hey, I'm still partying, I don't care, you go talk to someone else. And God told the watchman, Ezekiel, you tell them that this army is coming. If they listen, they will have saved themselves. And if they don't listen, they will die in their sin. But if you don't tell the people, then the people will die in their sins. But I'm also going to hold you responsible for it. Because that's your job. You're supposed to do that. Same way, if on your alarm system, you got a sensor telling you that someone's approaching, it's up to you. What are you going to do with it? Third thing to remember, share as gently as you're able. Now, the picture that I had up on the screen earlier about these three people in an argument, pointing fingers at each other and everything. It's very hard when the emotions are involved to keep things calm. But if you keep things calmer, the better your message gets across. 1 Peter 3:15. But in your hearts, honor Christ as Lord, as holy. Honor Christ the Lord as holy. Always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Okay, just that far, so to this point here. Always being ready to make a defense. We all should have an idea in mind of how to become a Christian. What steps does it take? What verses? What kind of diagram do you want to use? Do you want to draw on your napkin? Some people like a bridge diagram. A few years ago, we had those other diagrams. There's different diagrams you can use. Which one's your favorite? What stories can you tell? If you're a Christian, you became a Christian for a reason. Can you share that with someone? And it says, yet do it with gentleness and respect. And the next verse talks about that those who hear can glorify God on the basis of your good behavior. But doing it with gentleness and respect. I know as I was preparing this message, and I think about, how this world is changing, the environment is changing around us for being Christian. It wasn't that long ago that if you told someone that you're a Christian, people would at least respect it. They would recognize it, oh, good for you, good for you. Even if they're not. They say that's okay. Nowadays, in our sharply politicized environment, reactions become stronger and stronger. And forces of law are being applied, and then you have the trials on social media. All the comments that go up on social media. And it just gets tougher and tougher. I would encourage you to keep in mind the early church. The early church started off as a minority. Start off with Jesus and 12, and then if you take away Judas, Jesus and 11. But they were committed to their cause. They were committed to living out the gospel. And they struggled with it because the gospel took a while to get formulated and, as the Bible is written and then applied. A very small minority of people in a very anti-Christian environment. Yet over the course of maybe 300 years or so, that little motley crew of people grew and grew. And by the time around, the 3rd century or so, it started to become more and more influential, not because they became rich, not because they had armies and overthrew governments, but because they recognized the image of God in those around them. But because they lived the way Jesus lived, they sacrificed the way Jesus sacrificed. They said, greater love has no man than this, for one who lays down his life for his enemies. People who are willing to care for those whom society said, forget them, those in the leper colonies, and however we want to define leper colonies these days. But the Christians were willing to go there. The Christians were willing to establish hospitals and schools, and they grew. Even if we don't have the political strength behind us, we have God who is with us. And we can live in the ways that He has called us to live. One last piece of advice here. Keep digging into the Word. Keep digging into the Word. I don't know how many of you are still reading through the Bible in a year. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. But keep digging into the Word. Read it broadly, if you can, but also read it deeply, which you need to do. Sometimes we talked about that phrase of listening is things go in one ear and then out the other ear. Sometimes we're that way when we're reading. They go in one eye and out the other eye. You know, we're just so tired, or we're just trying to read, and you end up reading just because you can put a check mark somewhere. I did it. I did it. I did it. But what you need to do before you read is ask God to speak to you, because this is God's Word. Let Him speak to you. So as our response song is going to be, Speak, O Lord. Ask God to speak to you. Ask God to reveal Himself to you. Take that time, pull out a highlighter, or if you're too cheap for a highlighter, use your device and use the highlight feature. It didn't cost you a penny. Highlight things. Put notes in there. Ask questions. But keep digging. Keep digging into God's Word. And you'll be ready for when the time comes.
Speak, O Lord, as we come to you to receive the fruit of your holy word. Take your truth planted deep in us, shape and fashion us in your likeness, that the light of Christ might be seen today in our acts of love and our deeds of faith. Speak, O Lord, and fulfill in us all your purposes for your glory. Teach us, Lord, full obedience, holy reverence, true humility. Test our thoughts and our attitudes in the radiance of your purity.
your plans for us. Truths unchanged from the dawn of time that will echo down through eternity. And by grace will stand on your promises, and by faith will walk as you walk with us. As we go till your church is built and the earth is filled with your glory. And by grace will stand on your promises, and by faith will walk as you walk with us. So go, Lord, your church is built and the earth is filled with your glory. All right. Glad you guys can come and join us for worship.